Oh boy, you're about to learn about a typhoon and Poseidon all in the same video, and neither of them have anything to do with, well, gods or storms. They have to do with nukes. Yeah. Hey everyone, Meet Kevin here. The following tweet that I'm about to show you is creating some massive heart palpitations just this morning, and it comes amidst potential nuclear escalations by Putin and Russia over the last few days. Take a look on screen now. FX Hedge states Putin may test an underwater nuke 150 times stronger than the Hiroshima bomb near the Ukrainian border. Citation report. As a reminder, during World War II, 2 massive nuclear bombs were dropped on Japan by the United States. One of those bombs was nicknamed Little Boy. Here's a picture of it. It carried just under 15 kilotons of explosive power and weapons-grade uranium. This atomic bomb nearly instantly killed 80,000 people. The Hiroshima bomb was the first of 2, the second hitting Nagasaki just 3 days later. Obviously, nuclear war is terrible, but many of us do not wake up every single day fearing nuclear war. The Cold War is long behind us, and so is World War II. Many of us are too young to even remotely remember the fears that existed during these times. Well, now, folks, individuals like former CIA Director David Petraeus say that Putin is, quote, in a desperate situation and, quote, literally out of moves, and he is literally, quote, trying all different desperate actions because, after all, Russia is losing on the battlefield. And losing the battlefield isn't the only thing Russia is losing, as Russian troops are losing their lives. As they retreat from the eastern regions of Ukraine, some estimates say that the Russian loss of life has escalated to as high as 80,000. But what's really scary is that Russia has thousands of nuclear weapons, and Russia is scared. It fears the expansion of NATO, and Putin is acting paranoid in an attempt to preserve Russian regional hegemony or authority. Some say this is exactly why Russia could be behind attacks on its own Nord Stream pipeline. Now, of course, some say that's ridiculous. Come on, why would Russia blow up their own pipelines? It was obviously the United States who wants to secure a natural gas export market to Europe, after all. We have so much extra natural gas, let's just ship it to Europe, and let's just eliminate the chance that they could ever use those pipelines again connecting Europe to Russia, and let's make Europe dependent on us, so let's go blow up those pipelines. After all, we know exactly where they are. And you know what? That could be true, but it's also true and potentially even more scary than just that sort of for-profit motive potentially by the United States. But it's also potentially more scary that Russia knows their days of supplying gas via the Nord Stream to Europe are over. That Europe will never rely on Russia and the Nord Stream again because it gives Russia too much power over Europe. So if Russia already knows that, then maybe Russia could potentially create the imagery that they are indeed a madman. Because after all, the United States, whether we know it or not as individuals, the United States knows whether they did it or not, right? And if the United States knows that it wasn't a United States action, then that means it was probably, it could have been Ukraine, but it was probably Russia, because you gotta have some kind of sophisticated technology to get down that deep without detection. Who knows? It could have been Ukraine or Russia. There could have been a lot of different folks. But anyway, this is potentially now leading to fears that, my gosh, not only is Putin losing on the battlefield, thousands of people are losing their lives, hundreds of thousands of individuals are fleeing Russia to the point where Russian military police are essentially patrolling the borders, handing out papers, telling people you're enlisted as they try to leave the border. And the borders are so clogged up with people trying to flee Russia that you actually have days-long car waits just across the border, and people are like, screw it, I don't want to be in Russia anymore, I'll walk across the border. There are now images circulating on Twitter that Putin has gotten so desperate, he's having to recruit older military-aged men. We're talking 50 and 60-year-olds as opposed to just 20 and 30-year-olds. And so now, to continue this sort of potential madman rhetoric, apparently, there's this potential that Putin has ordered a nuclear train to move munitions closer to Ukraine. Here's the headline. It's the Times of London talking about a nuclear train being ordered to Ukraine. Now, the train pictured here has been connected with potentially mobilizing nuclear munitions, and some say this is Putin's way of suggesting, stop thinking I'm bluffing, stop thinking I'm losing. The game has just begun. This is kind of like flashing your ace at the table. Oh, you think you got the upper hand? Do you have this ace? Now, of course, NATO reports via Reuters that they have not actually seen any kind of pickup or escalation in Russian nuclear forces posture yet. However, there are fears rising around this that maybe this is more than just posturing. Maybe this is more than just, Putin showing off some leaked pictures potentially intentionally to create some fear. Maybe he's actually serious. And there certainly is a greater than zero chance that Putin is serious here. After all, the same people who told us that, Russia's not going to invade, very few people actually thought he was going to be crazy enough to invade, are kind of now the people saying, you wouldn't use a nuke. And it's the same thing that happens in reverse, which is also potentially just as scary. You literally have the Kremlin responding to these reports that they're moving around nuclear weapons, saying, this is Western media hysteria, complete nonsense. That's literally a copy and paste of what the Kremlin said as they were amassing hundreds of thousands of troops in Belarus and on the Russian border with Ukraine, and then they invaded on February 24th, right after the Chinese Olympics, okay? This is literally the same thing, which is scary. Now, this is now leading to rumors that Russia may start testing Poseidon. Now, Poseidon is, is a fancy name, but it's actually named for a torpedo, which sounds boring, right? I mean, come on, a torpedo? Really? That's what we're gonna be afraid of right now, Kevin? You're gonna make a video talking about nukes just to talk about Poseidon, a torpedo? Well, this ain't just a torpedo. This weapon right here is deemed an unstoppable weapon once launched. And according to the United States military intelligence, it's actually known as a, quote, intercontinental, nuclear-powered, nuclear-armed, autonomous torpedo. Okay, in English, that means it go very far, it does it by itself, it go very fast, and it make big boom boom. Okay, that big boom boom is potentially as strong as 2 megatons of blasting power, or about 150 times as strong as that Hiroshima nuke. Effectively with an unlimited range around the globe, because this torpedo, or water missile, travels at 108 knots. It's like 100 miles an hour, okay? Which means a torpedo like this, getting launched against, let's say, Mariupol. Let's say, okay, you have a submarine that is about this red line away from Mariupol. That's about 10 miles, okay? Well, if this sucker travels at over 100 miles an hour, it would take less than 6 minutes from launch to detonation, and the sub could be 10 miles away. You want to be twice as far away? Fine, less than 12 minutes. This weapon is sophisticated enough to be launched under the Arctic Sea, and obviously that's in the northern area where there is a lot of sea ice. But that actually makes it even more scary, because then that makes it even more difficult to intercept, or which potentially is already impossible to intercept. Now, what's fascinating is over in the Arctic Sea, there's actually the Belgorod nuclear submarine. Yes, this particular nuclear submarine is a Typhoon class submarine. And there are images circulating that this thing's just peacefully floating around. Some people spread rumors that the thing's gone missing, which implies that it's started diving and maybe it's approaching somewhere. Some people say this is what was responsible for the attacks on the Nord Stream pipeline, because maybe this massive Typhoon class submarine, a K-329, the largest submarine in the world, could potentially launch baby ships, like, for example, these suckers. These are potentially autonomous launch boats that basically just have a bunch of bombs strapped to them, see, warhead, and they have explosive detonators on the front, cameras on top, and you kind of just launch it from a sub and then drive it really deep in the ocean with all this iron cladding, making it potentially, well, I mean, depending on obviously how radar reflects off this, potentially very difficult to identify, depending on how deep it actually drives along trenches of oceans or whatever. But anyway, it's potentially possible that little boats like this, autonomous boats, could be launched from massive Typhoon class submarines and then you could just drive them into the pipeline, almost undetected, and then they blow up. Okay, those are like little torpedo boats, but the more scary thing is the actual torpedo, because this could carry a nuclear warhead. Now, it's possible that this Poseidon weapon could be launched without a warhead attached as sort of like a test. Think about kind of like North Korea style tests, right? Kamala Harris can tell you all about our strategic partnership with North Korea. Okay, that's a joke. But anyway, look, this is a problem, and it's leading to a lot of fear right now, because the fear that really comes up is the fear that what if Russia starts testing nukes like this, strategic nuclear weapons, and detonating them outside the coast of, let's say, Ukraine. And then we say that using nuclear weapons would be unacceptable, but then we end up pulling like an Obama red line. Okay, now, whether it's accurate or like whether it's justified or not, I guess I should say, one of the biggest stains on the Obama administration is his failure of basically fulfilling his promise with the red line. Okay, I'm going to explain that in just a moment, but I do just want to say this is not to attack Obama, because ultimately we ended up getting peace to some extent with Syria, and ironically Russia actually helped intervene in that. So to some extent the Obama administration was at least somewhat successful in responding to a chemical weapons attack in Syria. It just wasn't the way that we were expecting, and so this is why this whole Obama red line thing is frequently deemed to be a red stain. But I want to just briefly bring up some history here, because I think it could apply to the situation today, especially since Obama's vice president, Joe Biden, is now the president, okay? So quickly, in the middle of the night on August 21st, the Syrian military attacked rebel-controlled areas in Damascus, in the suburbs, with chemical weapons. They literally killed over 1,500 civilians and 400 children. People were literally running around and twitching as they fell over in hospitals, foaming at the mouth because of their exposure to sarin gas. It's an extremely toxic, odorless, colorless nerve agent. You don't need a lot to die. It's extremely lethal, even at low concentrations, and you've got maybe 1 to 10 minutes, and that's it. If you don't get an antidote instantly, you're done. It obviously crossed Obama's red line. And Obama said the military would act if Assad crossed it. However, Obama ended up going to Congress to authorize this, but Congress is slow, so things took some time. That led John Kerry, the then Secretary of State, to sort of suggest things like, let's see if we can get the Assad regime to give up some of their chemical weapons, and maybe if they give up some of their chemical weapons, then maybe we don't have to attack them. And so there was some diplomacy that ended up happening, and what we ended up with is Russia and the Assad regime working together to essentially get Assad to give up his chemical weapons, and Assad actually admitted to using these chemical weapons, and the whole thing kind of like fizzled out, which is like great. That's like the best way to end it, because think about it, like what if we then started attacking and creating a war with Syria? Would Russia have gotten involved at that point, right? So the problem is people are now creating this going forward fear that what if Biden says, hey, we will defend every inch of NATO territory. We will not find it acceptable that nuclear weapons are used, and then they get used and then we do nothing, or we wait for Congress or whatever. Will this potentially escalate things, right? Is that a style, a la we don't negotiate with terrorists yet, let's just say you do negotiate with terrorists, then they come back and do more crazy things, right? So I don't know, but either way, a use like this by Putin with this sort of nuclear torpedo would absolutely be devastating. Not so much because, even if it was just tested and didn't actually hurt anybody, which, pray to God, knock on wood, that doesn't happen. But something like this is used to send such a signal and now creates a red line for Biden. And a lot of folks are now speculating, well, would Biden actually have the strength to say, that's it, you've crossed the line, and now we actually are going to act, not just with diplomacy, but actual action. In which case, does that then spell the beginning of World War III and potentially a deeper recession and commodity price fears and so on and so forth? I have no idea, but I want to catch you up to speed with everything that's going on and the fear-mongering that's going on. There are a lot of people saying, the whole train thing has been debunked. The nuclear sub thing by Russia, whatever, big deal, they got a nuclear sub. But look, the bottom line is, it is a big deal. They have a nuclear sub. They've got thousands of nuclear weapons. And so far, Putin has proven he is not bluffing. So I think it's too easy to discard that we could potentially, within the next few months, see the start of some kind of strategic, localized nuclear warfare, which is quite scary. I hope not. But if you do want to get life insurance in as little as 5 minutes, you can go to metkevin.com/life and sign up for life insurance in as little as 5 minutes. You can even Apple Pay or Android Pay for it, and you'll see it in the links down below. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.